is 5:32. I'd like to open the meeting with a roll call attendance. Mike Dick.
Mike Dick here. Brian, before you go any further, there are also a number of questions on the town hall purchase. Do we have anyone from the town who will be speaking to that?
We have Jean and Paul both here in the room with me, and they can speak to town hall.
Great, thanks. So Mike Dick is here.
Great. Brian Host, present. Susan? You are on mute.
Susan Franklin, present.
Thank you. We had a confirmed sighting, but now we've got a voice. Francine?
Francine Lyons, present.
Corey?
Corey Evans here.
And I must say, folks, it is wonderful to have 5 members of capital budget. It's been a while. We've felt like a skeleton crew sort of slugging through this stuff, but it's nice to have a full force again. Ralph is traveling, but maybe joining us. And it looks like we've got Jean and Paul on board as well. So why don't we go ahead and jump right into the first items, which are first town hall and then public safety. And just recognizing the chiefs are going to join us in 30 minutes, maybe we hold the operating discussions until questions until they get here. But I turn it over to the three of you, Michelle, Paul, and Jean, however you want to handle it. I think just recognizing that we've had 2 executive session briefings along the way. People understand these projects are out there. I think we really withheld from those executive session discussions specific questions that would ultimately lead us to gain comfort in a vote. So I think that's going to be the nature of the shift in the discussion today. We're moving from sort of briefings to really drilling in a bit. And ultimately people are just I think trying to get comfort that we have the ability to keep these projects within the numbers that are being quoted. I think that's the single highest priority. So if we could give the update from that perspective, that's at least my starting point. Others are certainly going to have other things they're going to want to focus on. But.
Okay, so we've got a little echo. It's going to manage the tech, but second. So the quick update. There we go. Maybe not. So the quick update on town hall is we just signed the PNS, and we signed it for 9.1 million, which is lower than where we were negotiating. So great job, Michelle Larry, on that. The building, as I think you all may know, it's 17,000 square feet on 0.88 acres, 8,000 on the first floor, 7 1-bedroom units and 6 2-bedroom units are on the top 2 floors. We're going to hold back 1 unit for staff. Break room, and like staff functions. The 13 units will continue to help us with our affordable housing stock. We did meet the 40B requirement last week, and so we're very happy about that, but it's perceived as a good thing that we continue to build affordable housing. One of the questions, Brian, and I saw that you sent the list over. I haven't had a chance to fully marinate on all of the questions that you provided, but I'll try to hit them as I go. I think one of the questions you asked about were the operating costs for the building. And so Michelle, remind me, but I think we projected $270,000 would be coming in each year for rents for the 13 units based on affordable housing market rates around, we would do the ones that are set by the applicable guidelines. And so that would give us some solid rent coming in that we would use to operate the building and maintain the building. And I would suggest, unlike some of our other buildings, we don't have a lot of flex under Massachusetts state law from a landlord tenant perspective of not immediately addressing issues. And so one thing we talked about with KP, and Chris is working with them on, is a revolving fund that we would put those rents to operate and maintain and repair the building on an as needed basis, because the property manager is going to need to be able to do that and deploy that money quickly if there's, like, let's say, you know, something happens in a unit, in order to maintain our obligations under applicable law. And we are intending to hire a property manager if and when One Pleasant Street passes. We will put the RFP out at that point. We've already been talking with some folks informally, including those that run other housing on behalf of towns and other towns. And so that is moving forward. Michelle, can you remind me how much extra parking we're adding for that building? Because that has come up in some conversations too.
So there'll be about 30 additional spots.
30 additional spots. Now, keep in mind, I don't know, I'm sure most of you have driven past the property, but it's right in Paul's neighborhood, and there's already a pre-existing town lot there that not many people park in that has 30 spots. I went on Saturday and I counted them, and there's 30 in the pre-existing lot that essentially abuts where the new 30 spots would be. And hardly anyone parks, although you might know better in that.
No, it's an average, maybe 3-4 vehicles, and if they are, they may be at the James Lane across the street, and usually it's a visitor parking, or right now, we're paving, as we know, Elm Street, Cushing, Pleasant, so there will be some overflow there, but that's temporary. But usually on an average, since I walk my dogs past it every morning, there's maybe 2 to 3 cars, and there's just neighbors right down the street if they have a little overflow.
So we're looking at a parcel right now that has a total of 60 parking spots that are really sort of connected to, that will be town owned and will be available for public parking. There's also a big parcel behind Town Hall at 2 Smith Place. This is not a part of the Town Hall project that we're proposing, but it could hold some future opportunities because there's limited usage for it, given its road access and some other environmental issues. Okay, so that is the One Pleasant Street quick rundown. Before I move on to the existing town hall and thoughts there, are there, well, I'll just run through it all, and then I guess I'll open it up for you all to ask whatever questions you'd like. So with the existing town hall, we have gotten a lot of feedback on the existing town hall, and it seems like most definitely want to do some sort of historic preservation of the existing historic building. There's a more open question on the annex, but for now, what we are considering is just a long-term repair plan, trying to maximize historic money, particularly for the existing town hall that, or I should say the historic town hall that we think we will prioritize, really doing the restoration of. And we have been considering and contemplating, and the select board will need to discuss this, all of us, not just Paul and I, tomorrow, but allocating some money vis-a-vis the capital stabilization fund through a warrant article to begin a repair process in anticipation of the spring, without identifying exactly the repairs. So Michelle and John Hallen have already gone through town hall with Nick, making a punch list, trying to figure out what we need. We have a roof proposal, we have windows we're possibly looking at. So we'd probably try to set the money aside and then use it for, start doing the more specific repairs during the ATM process with all the rest of the capital requests. So that is our thought. Also the existing
Dean,
town
can I
hall. in the
ask you for a
interim,
clarification?
either do the repairs or you take in input on programming there. Will serve as important swing space in the interim as all of these buildings are sort of moving around. So for example, One Pleasant Street, if that passes, probably won't be ready to be moved in until March. If we are renovating at 135 Pleasant Street, where our detectives currently are, we could use that existing town hall for some swing space for them. If we were to do any sort of, let's say we did a renovation on a part of the school building during the summer, then we could use some of that existing town hall for swing space for the school administration that's still there during that limited time. So we do like the idea of having it also provide options as we're looking at different needs and possibilities over time. So
we-
that's what we're ultimately looking at. Do we have a specific concrete exact plan on existing town hall, including the exact numbers of money and grant and historic preservation grants? No, we do not. Do we have a sense of where we think that the town will likely support and the need to start doing repairs? Yes, we do, but we want to see what happens at One Pleasant before we start putting any significant money or and when I say money, it's probably more towards like figuring out programming needs as well as historic grants, et cetera, in that direction, because I think we need to land One Pleasant Street before we can start assuming that the town hall is empty, essentially,
Excuse
and
me.
able to have those repairs done too.
Gene,
Okay.
I'm
Jill, did I miss
confused.
anything, or Paul, anything you'd like
No.
to add? Okay.
Can anyone hear me?
The swings out.
Yeah, I can, Michael. Let me see if I can perhaps put a frame around this. Old Town Hall is not on our agenda, okay? To the extent that for tonight. And so we don't want to go too far astray into that, nor do I want it to occupy too much time. I'd like to ask one question just for a second so that everyone can get the benefit of clarity of what you're, possibly contemplating. And, then we're actually going to put this on, we're going to have to put that on a future agenda. But I hear that some people are out there concerned about Old Town Hall. I hear that you're suggesting that, it's going to be fundamentally a systematic maintenance and upgrade as opposed to a big bang. At least that's what's being contemplated right now as a project. The piece that caught my attention, and I think that's all fine, it makes sense. The piece that caught my attention was, the possibility of actually making an appropriation at special town meeting out of the capital stabilization fund for, yet undefined
No,
projects.
I'm sorry, Brian, let me rephrase, because I think this
Okay.
will quickly address that. The warrant article that we were sort of mulling over was whether to move free cash into capital stabilization right now to anticipate repairs that would be needed for town hall versus waiting until the spring. I mean, it's sort of half dozen to the other, but we wanted to show commitment to starting those repairs in a responsible way.
Okay, that's
Brian?
helpful in clarifying it. Yes, Michael?
Okay, just back up a few steps, please. In Gene's presentation, it seems like we talked about the existing town hall without specifying historic versus annex. So as you go forward, could you please be clear on which building you're talking about in terms of money that you foresee spending and future plans?
Yes, so we're gonna prioritize the historic section for sure, because there have been discussions about potentially tearing down the annex, which would leave just the existing town hall and doing some work surrounding the annex, including with some repairs that could be expensive, such as, for example, an elevator, and trying to seek CPC funding or historic preservation money to get that building sort of restored to its old glory, but also with the new accessibility that it will need for that purpose. And so that's one option that's on the table that could work out. And so then we won't be talking about the annex, but if that doesn't happen, then yes, we'd be talking about just a long-term repair plan for annex plus the historic section. With the annex obviously not being eligible for CPC or historic grant money.
Okay, I've got more questions for further on, but if you could just try and keep those two buildings specifically mentioned as you go through your discussion, appreciate it.
Okay, Michael, are your further questions with regards to the plan on Old Town Hall? And both historic and annex, or is it with regards to Pleasant Street?
All of the above. We have a list of questions we've developed over the last several meetings
Yeah,
that we should be going through.
right. I've forwarded those so that people could at least start thinking about them. So what I'd like to suggest is that, you know, Old Town Hall and people's concerns around that are perhaps not as time sensitive as Pleasant Street. And so I'd really like to focus this discussion, particularly given we're going to lose, you know, our guests this evening fairly quickly. I'd really like to focus on Pleasant Street. Do others on capital budget feel the same way? Or, I mean, I hadn't really contemplated spending a lot of time on Old Town Hall this evening.
It's kind of hard to, it's both, I see your point, Brian, but I also see Mike's point where it's hard to kind of, if we're talking about total project costs and we're moving from one building to another, that is going to come down the pike, right? Where if we, you know, if we do this, there's going to be a bill coming due. So it's kind of, you know, it both muddies it, but it's also part of the longer thing. I think probably for lineage or for linear conversation, starting with One Pleasant, I think it's fine that we, you know, we don't left and right, but obviously it's all going to be part of the same string of whatever, because obviously we can't leave the building just rotting there. I doubt that's the plan. So maybe it is, I don't know. So I think they're in bounds.
We've already heard that's not the plan. It's
Yeah, no, exactly.
Maintenance and upgrades.
I've got two
Okay.
questions on Pleasant Street that are quick.
Let's go to Pleasant Street and let's focus there first. I don't want to get distracted by Old Town Hall. It's been there for, you know, 125 years. It's not going anywhere. One Pleasant is a time sensitive issue.
Do we have a number? I know that you just mentioned the commercial space is 8,000. The whole building is 17,000. What is the total square footage for the town hall, the municipal usage, which includes kind of the upstairs break room? Do you have that number handy?
It 9,000.
It's about 9,000 square feet.
Okay, and then I know this is, it sounds like there isn't a whole lot of information on this, but just since Gene brought up the income from the units, I guess conceptually,
Actually,
are we
Corey,
looking-
if I can interject for a second, just as long as we're on the square footage, I'm just trying to reconcile something. If the first floor of the building is 8,000, I assume the second floor of the building is another 8,000, which gets me to 16,000. And then it looked like the building has a third floor, you know, built into the actually built into the slope of the roof, which I think should come out at about, you know, half. What am I missing something?
Yep. So Brian, the total square footage includes all the hallways and everything as well. So if you take just the apartment size in the first floor, the total square footage of the building is 17,000. However, each unit is running at about 900 square feet for a 2-bedroom, and I think a little under about 700 square feet for 1-bedroom.
I guess I'm just trying to do the math on total square footage. I would think it would be more than, I mean, if we've got an 8,000 square foot footprint and we've got 3 floors, recognizing the third one is not full square footage.
there's also an external hallway, which probably doesn't count.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how, you know, it's just 1,000 feet up on the third floor, or whether or not we have a different total square footage number. Just something didn't connect.
Michelle's pulling out the plans.
Okay.
But while she does it, I did want to talk about the affordable housing eligibility issues, which I see were questions on here. So with respect to how the town determines the eligibility of occupants, this is a state process in terms of income guidelines and who qualifies for what. And so the town really isn't determining, you know, what incomes will sort of let you in or out. We would expect to be following the applicable town guidelines. And so, you know, as much as we might like, for example, to have firefighters or even teachers in there, a lot of them maybe have incomes that are higher under the applicable guidelines. And so we would use a property manager like other towns do to make sure
Okay.
that we're compliant with applicable guidelines.
So there was a brief discussion about this with town council at some point that, you can try to steer these towards certain groups. I think veterans was another one that was mentioned. I guess really the question is, do we as a town and actually intend to have a policy towards directing these towards specific groups, or are we just gonna put these out to the general market for low income housing?
Can we just be clear? Are we talking about the 4 that are deeded 40B, like capital A affordable, or all of them? Just what are we talking about? I mean, you just mentioned the state process, but this has apartments in it that aren't capital A affordable deeded. And I thought this conversation was a lowercase a kind of affordable. So what are you referring to? And Brian, what are you asking about? Because I don't want us to get confused on these two different things.
Yeah, so yes, there are 4 that are quote affordable from a state perspective. We would likely use the same state guidelines, just because
That's
this
fine
is just
for
the
those 4.
fair-minded prosecutor and me. Once you start like making up your own income guidelines and picking and choosing who gets in and who doesn't get in, you start to run into discretion issues, including when it comes to fair housing laws. And so it would be my strong preference to do everything by the book. Now, whether we have certain preferences, we have talked about whether we can do local preference. And that is something that we've talked about with our council with. And I
So
think
you would
that-
put all 13 into the 40B lottery system. You would just kind of do that. Is that because we're not just the 4, all 13 would be, 40B qualifying apartments.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And listen, we want to talk more with the Affordable Housing Trust too, to iron this out. I've reached out to Steve Gomer and we would expect to have them work with us on this. What I would say is, whether it's little affordable A or big affordable A, there's certainly no shortage of people that need affordable housing in Cohasset or our community. I think what we want to avoid and steer clear of is any improprieties in terms of people picking and choosing friends and all like this stuff that gets you into trouble. That's what
Obviously, yeah.
is
It
inappropriate.
doesn't even need mention, Gene. I mean, whatever we have to do, whatever we do, it has to be legal and clean. There's no question around that. So Corey, just one point of clarification. I mean, there are 4 that are deeded affordable, but then we get credit for all 13 in terms of 40B.
Well, and
Okay.
I understand that fully,
Yeah.
but I'm asking if we're going to treat the other net,
Right.
the other 9.
So I'm just clarifying
As-
the question. So
Okay, my apologies.
yeah, so I just want to clarify the question. We don't have to put the other 9 and actually make them affordable in order to get credit for them being affordable. Is the intent to make them affordable? In other
Yes.
words, okay. So we're not getting any extra goose, any extra bump on the 40B count. This is really just a policy decision.
Yes, this is like
Okay.
let's do the right thing.
Yep. Okay.
Oh,
And is there any contemplation that the Affordable Housing Trust would actually, buy down these units from the town and hold them as a separate entity, or is the thought that the town will hold these units, hold the whole building, hold the whole units, just, work with a property manager?
I think right now, no. I think we could contemplate it in the future and see how it goes, but right now, I think it's a lot to ask the Affordable Housing Trust, who are all volunteers, to be in charge of such a big endeavor. And when I say big endeavor, I mean, if they're having to go back and forth with a property manager, I think some of the feedback I got, I think some of them were maybe worried about that aspect, including because they are volunteers. Let's say we can't get a quorum, right?
Yeah.
Like we can't afford to make mistakes like that in terms of management when it comes to people living in affordable housing, perhaps needing whatever we need to do to responsibly manage it. That said, I don't think it's off the table, but for now, I think it's envisioned that the town would take it on. And let's be clear, the Affordable Housing Trust, they get money vis-a-vis the town.
Right. I think you're spot on, Gene. I'm processing in my head here as I twist it back and forth whether or not there's any financial advantage to having the Affordable Housing Trust hold
Nope.
these units. I don't think they get capital at any different cost than us, and I don't think they're exempt from state
Same
procurement regs. So I think they're stuck in this, and they're not for profit, so they don't get to depreciate the building. can't really think offhand.
Well, and they can ask for CPC funding for this,
Yeah.
but so can we, so can the town.
Yes.
So,
Yes,
Yes.
I'm just personally having trouble finding out, finding a benefit to putting with affordable housing, versus just holding it with the town. Does anyone else have thoughts?
On the affordable housing piece or other questions?
Whether or not there's an advantage to putting it with affordable housing, I can't come up with one.
I had a question on the affordable housing piece, and
Yeah.
that is, and maybe this came up when we were talking, when council was on a while back, but why the Cohasset Housing Authority wouldn't be taking these over?
may consider that. And we are in conversations with them to see what capacity they have. So that's an ongoing conversation, but for right now, so Michelle has been in conversations with the Cohasset Housing Authority, including as it relates to property management, but possibly
Okay.
more in the future.
It just seems they would probably, I think they would be best suited for this. And I know other towns that have housing authorities, they manage their affordable housing stock that way.
Yeah, and Michelle just updated me that they're, a part of, for them is they're bringing it before their board.
I see.
And so they're working through their process as we work through ours, so. we
Okay. Do
Have things running in parallel.
Thank
do they actually have skills to manage, or do they just outsource the same
They
way the
outsource.
town would?
They
They
outsource.
outsource as well.
Right,
So they would just hire a property manager to handle the tenants, handle the maintenance and break fix calls, things like
I'll let
that.
Michelle jump in, because she's been doing,
Okay.
doing the day-to-day on
I'm
this.
I'm just trying to process whether or not there's even a benefit to having them manage it. I mean,
So we're also in discussions, Brian. Can you hear me? Okay, sorry.
We can hear
We're
you, yes.
also in discussions with the property management company that manages the TOD building,
Okay.
as well as 390 CJC
Mhm.
and 8789 Cushing Road. So they manage all these units in Cohasset to date. So we're in discussions with them as well, and to see if they want to add an additional 13 units to their stock.
Makes sense. I mean, they've got the bodies and the expertise in town, so it would be an easy add to their portfolio.
Right.
Okay, that's a good, really a good idea, and hopefully they have interest.
Michelle, are they able to? Is there some sort of state qualification for putting an RFP for these things?
Nope, they're able to do it if they so choose. If they'd like to add it to their stock, they're able to do it.
But we don't have to RFP for a property manager on a.
It depends on the cost.
Okay.
Based on some of the costs that I've heard from the other buildings, I don't think it's going to be necessary.
Doesn't reach the threshold.
Yeah.
That's well, hopefully they come in with a nice competitive and attractive number.
Right.
I guess one question I had, I mean, we're going to generate 270K of revenue off this building. Some of that obviously will go to the property manager. Some of it will go to the revolving fund. Some of it will go to break fix maintenance. Where do people contemplate the rest of that money going? My guess is, there's going to be a whole lot left over because it's not a direct mortgage on this building. We're talking about doing this with excluded debt. So where will that revenue go?
Yeah, Brian, so I think this is something that is going to be evolving over time once we see how much money we actually get in the door. Now, keep in mind, you're dealing with affordable housing units.
Yeah.
And we're presuming we have 100% of the people paying 100% of the time, that we don't have eviction costs, we don't have the normal back and forth that might show up in the context of affordable housing. So there's going to be additional costs and management beyond simply that. Now, I think, and this is what I was talking, hey chief, this is what, we were talking with KP about, is whether we could do a partial amount into the revolving fund. Once we figure out like what our run rate is, a responsible run rate is, right? And I I don't think we're there yet of knowing exactly what that responsible run rate is on these units. Once we get up and going and seeing what rent is coming in on a predictable basis, I'm sure they have, you know, some sort of modeling that they can do to figure out defaults, evictions, costs.
Yeah.
all of that.
I
And
would think
that's
the
what
property
the
manager
Affordable
could
Housing
probably come
Trust
up with a
would
pretty
help us
decent
do.
model.
I think it would be great, candidly, if we could use the extra money to continuously repair our existing town hall. It seems to be poetic justice in that regard, but I think until we know.
Okay, so net summary, I think what I'm hearing is initially 100% of the revenue is going to go into into a revolving fund. It's going to be used to cover costs, and it's going to stay there until we figure out what the real run rate is of the building. And then once we get comfort that, you know, comfort and visibility on what is sort of available in terms of those funds, the thought is that we would put that into Old Town Hall.
Well, and it may happen more quickly than, you know, depending on what sort of comfort we can get from a property manager who has a lot
Yeah.
of experience trying to assess all of this. Like I said, right now, you know, with the Cohasset Housing Authority, we're at the beginning stages, having just learned about the building essentially like 6 weeks ago, trying to figure out what those costs may be.
Okay.
But yeah, so we don't have a specific exact plan yet, including where the residual goes, but I think there's quite
I
a
think
few.
Old Town Hall would be fairly poetic. And that certainly addresses the concerns people have. I mean, my concern, others on the committee may have different concerns, but you know, my very first concern would be, you know, making sure that we don't funding a building with excluded debt and then have the revenues off of that building, you know, bleed into the operating budget. That doesn't really seem like the right thing to fund with excluded debt. So I you know, either like it to maintain this building or go to something other than headcount additions. That's just me speaking personally as a preference. It's not me speaking for the committee. I don't.
Hey, Brian, just to let you know, we have our chiefs here, Chief Quigley and Chief Dr. Ray. I don't know if that
Okay.
influences how you want to proceed, but.
Yeah, we want to switch over to public safety pretty quickly, but
Hey, Brian, before we do,
Yeah.
I think Corey and I both have some questions on this topic.
I was just going to
think the
say,
fact-
before we do that, do other people have questions?
So I'll yield to Corey, and then I'd like to, and certainly Francine and Susan.
Yeah, no, so just, I mean, to tee off, Brian, what you're saying, and the numbers aren't clear. I get that. I know why. From a policy perspective, what is the policy with this? Is this where, you know, these units are supposed to be revenue neutral? So we are paying off some of the debt service with it. We are paying for maintenance. We are paying for management. Are they revenue generating where the town is making money off these units, or are they being subsidized by the town? So, I mean, that's a very oversimplistic kind of 3 lanes, but that's kind of what we're talking about. So as a policy, what of those 3 is kind of the goal?
I would say, Corey, it's probably 1 or 2. It's definitely not 3. All right, we're not looking to subsidize them in the sense that they're already subsidized because the town owns them, so there's no profit margin necessary, right? So just by doing that alone, it takes the need for profit with a big P out of it. And we don't know yet. See, one of the challenges is, again, Michelle really has made tremendous inroads, and I want to thank Paul Kears for all his help on this too, to get on us on a path for management company. So we have a couple of really live companies that are real that I think will respond to an RFP when it goes out, and they'll be able to guide us all through this. And again, I think they'll do the math, and we'll do the math. And we've already done some back of the envelope math. And the building's brand new, right? So it shouldn't need a lot of work in the short term. That said, we've all lived in houses or apartments or whatever. Things break, things leak. We have to make sure there's funds for that. We have to make sure there's there's going to be costs for those things. The management company will explain all those. So I think at the least it would be neutral. If everything works out really well, it becomes positive, and that money then pays for maybe the long-term maintenance of as we've already talked about. This building itself, One Pleasant, will be revenue neutral in the sense that maybe the cost will actually maintain the whole building, not just those apartments. And in a even better case scenario, it helps us do other things like renovate the historic structure. And maybe even, help make more affordable housing possible in other places. I really think we have to see how it evolves. I mean, this is going to be a brand new experience for us. That said, I'm pretty confident it's 1 or 2. It's definitely not 3.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it?
It for me, Mike. All you.
I have several questions. And my apologies to the chiefs, but we're on this topic. I'd like to continue. From what I think I'm hearing, the town is going to designate all of the apartments as affordable, which means the revenue at 270 is based on I'll use the term lower rent versus market rate. Am I
Yes.
right on that?
Yes,
Okay, so these will be below market rents, correct? Okay.
that's the plan.
So in looking at our revenue structure, and I want to follow along what Corey is saying, I feel that we really need to have a portion of the revenue directed to paying down the debt and not ask the town to support a tax increase to underwrite 100% affordable housing. That we should be structuring however you're going to raise the taxes in a way to pay down the debt over an accelerated period, to use market rents for perhaps X% of the stock that you're offering to the market to help us pay down the debt so that the town is not underwriting affordable housing across the board. So that's one comment I'd like to lay out there, that we need to be thinking much more strategically about how much money you're asking the town to contribute by way of a tax increase and over what time period. I have many other questions, but I think that's the most important point I wanted to relay. And I just want to ask Susan and Francine if they have anything else on this topic before we move.
My only question was on the purchase price, and I think we talked about this in our first meeting, but I wanted to know if there was any more clarification on what other costs may be involved in acquiring the building.
So we signed the PNS for 9.1 million, which includes also paving of the area and essentially getting a building that's 85, if not 90% fully done.
Well, actually 100%,
100%, sorry, 100.
or 98, 99%.
But footnote, so Michelle, you want to weigh in on some of the additional costs we're looking at?
Sure. So the only additional cost that we are looking at, and that we have to pay prevailing wage on, is the vaults. We did have a company come down and assess the vaults today. Great news is the doors that we have in the town hall today can be transferred to the new building, therefore saving us money. And the next phase of the vault structure is just to get a masonry cost to have the cinder blocks built for it to be fire rated. But we're going to reuse the doors we already have to install the vault. So the amount of money we thought we would pay for vaults is significantly lower due to that reuse.
Then we have soft costs with moving and
Yeah, that's all included in the price, is the soft cost, which is the FF&E, your furniture, your fixtures and equipment. And that's all included as well.
That's all included in the 10 million number, is that correct?
I'm sorry, Brian.
Michelle, when you said FF&E and all the soft costs, they're included in the 9.1 million or in the 10 million estimate?
The 10 million estimate.
Okay. And
I
just a
think what
question on
you're
the,
hearing, Brian, is that it's likely going to be significantly less than 10 million when all is said and done, but we're trying to be conservative.
okay, so it includes IT, kind of everything. This includes everything. There's not like a follow-on request coming in annual town meeting for all the stuff we forgot. Okay. I'm smiling because that happened at Osgood. And Capital has a very institutional memory, so hence the question. Any other questions on town hall here?
will we be coming back to this, Brian?
We will need to. I mean, we're not going to vote this tonight, obviously. And I discussed this with Gene last night. Do we postpone the meeting and budget more time, or do we just get the dialogue started so that people understand where our questions are coming from? We opted to move forward, recognizing that this is going to take more than one bite at the apple, particularly given the magnitude of the projects. And, you know, Gene and Michelle and Chris, just for your benefit, one of the things we discussed at Capitol last week is we really are not going to be comfortable and or willing to vote things until we see the warrant articles. And to the extent the warrant articles are just boilerplate and all that action is in the motion, then we need to see the motions. It's very hard to vote things when you don't actually know what you're voting on. So we would just ask you to move those to the front of the list in terms of whatever town council is preparing and send those over. We don't need the whole warrant. We just need these in order to, I think, vote this prudently. Any other comments from Capital before we switch to public safety? Okay, why don't we flip over? And do we just want to start with an update on the property and the stage of planning, so that we know what we know and what we don't know at this point? I think that would probably avoid a lot of circular questioning.
Yeah, so right now we're still trying to land the PNS, which I think is gonna be, we're gonna sign it maybe tomorrow at the select board meeting. That's for 2.4 million for the property. And a part of what is contained in the 10 million in total, which includes an additional 8 above the purchase price, and breaking that further down is 6 million of the renovations with a $2 million contingency. That includes an elevator in the back, potentially in the back. They're eyeing 2 different staircase potentials right now. The vestibule in the front, you definitely need it. Might I remind everyone of the chainsaw incident, and we don't, need to go any
Chainsaw
further.
massacre of our building.
So we definitely need that. Obviously the jail cells
Sorry.
in the back, and then the 2 bays in the back of the building, the sally port for 2 pieces of equipment. And a big part of the cost involved is also clearing and excavating in the back in order to make room for the bays in the back. And so that is where we are right now, and we're basing these estimates and this cost on information, including trying to assess what we need to do with the jail cells from walkthroughs that our building inspector has done with Michelle and the public safety consultants who build buildings for a living. We do not have a design right now. We've asked them to provide one. We're still waiting at this point for it, but the building is already built. It's a rectangle.
Mhm.
And imagine a smaller rectangle of jails inside the top right-hand corner, with another rectangle on the back for the base, and then an elevator built in. And so we're trying to get that information, including like conceptually what that might look like. But a part of the rub is we don't have money to pay them to do real plans, because we're trying to move quickly, including to capture the market opportunity that exists. So that's sort of just, I'll stop there if you want.
Let me ask one question and make one comment. You said the 2 bays in the back, or I think of the back as being into the hill. I was under the understanding the 2 bays were actually going to go to the north side of the building, basically directly between the building and Sunrise. So just sort of, in line with the building, just further north on, along 3A, right, for lack of better terms. Where conceptually are the bays actually going?
So based on the current conversations that they're having, they have noted that they can go to the right side, as you just indicated, in between Sunrise and the building. But if there's significant clearing out back, it may make sense to have them level with the second floor. So there's two different thought processes, and I think if you actually toured the building, you may have a better understanding of why they're saying this. So I think that's really important.
Okay.
And then we can actually go through and lay out where things potentially could go. And then if you had questions from there, we could certainly speak to the designer and see what their thoughts are.
If that's on offer, I think it'd be incredibly I personally think it would be incredibly helpful for the capital budget committee as a group to go walk that building and just get a verbal as to where stuff is going to go. I think it'd help people understand it and really get comfort with it. How do others feel about that?
I think that's always helpful.
Francine, Mike, Corey, thoughts? Thumbs up.
Yeah, I agree.
Smile.
That makes sense.
I'm not overly concerned about where stuff goes, I leave that up to them. That wouldn't sway me either way. So.
Okay.
So maybe if we can come up with a time that both capital and there's a bunch of advisory members on as well, maybe we could do a joint meeting and tour together.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Corey, just your point,
sorry,
to some degree is spot on. I mean, it's not really for us to decide where stuff goes, but I think actually getting an understanding that we know where stuff is going gives me at least some comfort that we're working with more real numbers than fictional.
Well, but I mean, I'm not an expert in this field, right? So I mean, if I had if I had a report from somebody who was an expert, it's one thing, but me going around and go, oh, that makes sense for jail. I don't know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
So, outside of emotionally feeling better, I'm not quite sure the data is any better for me, but I am questioning the one question, just to be clear, the site work will include clearing out for the bays, but we're not talking about building bays yet. We're just leveling that land. Did I understand that properly? Did I misunderstand that?
So I believe we're talking about actually building the bays as well. We're going to clear the land, build the bays.
For the $6 million renovation cost?
Mhm.
Is that included in that? Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Thanks. I misunderstood. But Brian, just to kind of clarify my last thing, like I'd love to, if there's a report that we can see, that would be meaningful to me.
So what I can add to this is that both police and fire have done their programming piece with the designer, and that is something that we can share. And it does indicate how many square foot is needed for every single item on the list. So without having the illustration, at least you can see that there's enough square footage for everything that we're asking for. So we can get that to you midweek. Chief Dockery just finished his space planning last week, so they can send us that report by mid to late week this week.
Okay, that's extremely helpful.
Brian, we have some questions from the last go round. Do we want to raise them now so the chiefs can hear them from us, or have the chiefs go ahead and present and then we can bring those questions around?
I think recognizing we've got 10 minutes with the chiefs, okay, maybe a little bit more, but not much more. They need to go prep for this 7 o'clock and just tell us when we need to stop. But I think perhaps we should let them lead, and then, to the extent we have questions, we can bundle them with our prior questions and we can deal with them in a follow-up. I have one specific question I want to ask on this call, but let's start with the chiefs.
There you go.
Susan.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Chief Dockery. Thanks for joining us. Chief Quigley has dropped in as well.
What information are you looking for?
Yeah, so is there specific information you all are looking for?
Yeah,
Because
there is specific information I'm looking for, and others, on the committee may have different views, but, I've, been around capital for a while. This topic has come up for a while. I know you guys have wanted a location out on 3A. No, and I'm assuming, I'm just going to leave it face value for a second, that you're comfortable with this location, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. The other thing that capital has always focused on is, okay, let's say we do a location on 3A. What does that mean in terms of staffing? Because we don't manage staffing and operating budgets, but we do focus very much on making moves on the capital side that have direct implications on the operating budget. And we're very sensitive to operating decisions that have direct implications on the capital budget. In the past, Chief Dockeray, your predecessor had always said, this would not result in headcount increases. It would result in taking people out of the Elm Street location, moving them over to the new location. And we would simply, restage assets, both people and vehicles. That's history, obviously, but I just want to make sure that to the extent we're envisioning something different today, that we discuss that. To the extent we're, that's consistent, that we affirm it, just so that we all know exactly what we're getting into here.
Yeah, Brian, that is correct. We just redeploy personnel.
Okay. That's extremely helpful and gives me great comfort. Thank you, Chief Dockeray.
Brian. Yeah, we'd remain the same as well. At some point down the road, discussion for a different day, we probably should add someone to the department, either by grant or just increase staffing. We've been the numbers have been flat for years, and as you probably know, the overtime is north of $600,000 a year at this point. So it's something that we should look at long term. But as far as this project goes, there'd be no change.
Okay, just totally hear you guys with regards to staffing needs and pressures. I just want to make sure that the building itself, the addition of the building itself, doesn't change the way we function and trigger new headcount requirements. We'll leave the rest to advisory in terms of when and how to to add heads and costs to the extent they deem that appropriate. That was my key issue. I'll turn it over to other members of the Capital Budget Committee for the chiefs.
We had a number of questions over the last couple of weeks, chiefs, and what I'm about to relay to you has been given by different people on our board as opposed to me specifically, but some of these I definitely want to know about too. So to begin with, we had a question on the need for 2 vehicles and 2 bays. The point raised was that the second ambulance at one time was kept at the water department and seemed to be serviceable there. Can you help us understand why both bays are going to be required?
Operationally, Mike, one is a sally port or a bay, and it has to be big enough for an ambulance. Because when we bring someone that's in custody, we do that inside that sally port, and it's direct access into a booking room. And there has to be room for 2 cars.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
the way we understood it was differently. So that's good to know that it's for 2 police vehicles versus 2 fire department vehicles.
Yeah, no, it's nothing to do. The sally port has nothing to do with fire apparatus, except being of a size that could accommodate an ambulance.
Okay, so the 2 bays, can you explain what each bay does? Either chief?
Well,
one is a sally port?
One bay is a sally port for prisoner transport. The other one is
for fire apparatus.
Yeah, but one has to be kept clear, and it's really sort of a sterile environment. There's no weapons that can be grabbed, no brooms, no shovels, chainsaws.
No firefighting axes.
Yeah, no Halligans. Nope.
Okay.
Right. The question came up also on the driveway grade, and we were told that both of you had been consulted. Both of you are comfortable with the grade, but since the question was raised and you're on with us, could you explain why you feel that the grade is really fine, not going to be a problem in the future?
I don't see any issue with it at all.
Okay.
We're pretty nimble. And it doesn't seem extreme to me. And, you know, I'm up there every day. Seems fine.
Okay. And Chief Dockeray, you don't see any problems with getting a heavier piece of equipment like an engine up and down in bad weather, ice? So
Nope,
forth?
we have grades worse off in town that we make up, that we can get
Mhm.
up there. Again, every winter we have the same problem. As long as we get salt and sand in the plow, we can get there.
Okay.
DPW does a nice job taking care of us, so I'm not worried about the grade at all.
Terrific.
Just before we leave the base, Michael, a question for Chief Dockeray. Do we intend to actually have a pumper over there, or is this just an ambulance in theory?
No, I'm recommending a pumper and an ambulance
Okay,
because it allows us to deploy the personnel to respond to calls. If it's a fire call, they take the pumper.
Right.
If they
Okay.
if it's a medical, they take the ambulance.
okay.
So it allows us to improve our response times, to those areas for those type of incidents. You know, we don't know what the incident is until they call us.
Understood. So does that in any way impact your answer? I mean, I could see navigating sort of, you know, the curb cut around the building and to the far side in an ambulance probably pretty easily. Is there enough swing space in there to move a big piece of equipment through fundamentally an S curve?
I know in the front of the building, we can maneuver apparatus. I haven't seen where the plans for the fire bays are going, so I really can't answer that right now, Brian.
Okay. I was just thinking when Michelle said we might put them in the back, up the hill on level with the second floor, I'm thinking, wow, that's a lot of curves and a lot of elevation for a pumper truck. So just mention it as we think about where those go.
Right, but hopefully that's going to be included in the program information that we've given to the designers. If I can go on to one or two more questions. We had a question on why 5 holding cells. We understand you need one for male, one for female, one for youth. But could you explain to us the 5?
Sure, it's actually, we currently, we have 4. The number would be 4. It's usually 2 male, 1 female, and 1 juvenile.
Great.
And cell is not a proper way to categorize the juvenile holding area. It's a holding area. There's no more bars or anything like that.
Right.
So it actually be 4, 3 cells in 1 holding area.
Right. And then the final question that I have on my list is, what is the gain? What is the drop in the response time that you're now figuring on? You know, with that location active, how much time are you going to be saving now by going from there to the various points around town?
We probably save 2 to 3 minutes,
Mhm.
especially up in the 3A corridor. Again, the response times was supposed to be within 4 to 6 minutes, the national standard set by NFPA. And we don't meet those, especially up in North Cohasset. We have the Sunrise, we have Evoke.
Yeah.
We had the building fire back in January, 700 block of Jerusalem Road. It was a day kind of like this. It took us 9 minutes to get on scene.
Right.
So if we're up in that area, we can probably shave a good 2 to 3 minutes off the response times to that part of town.
Right. Thank you, both of you. Those are all the questions that I had on my list. Does anyone else, Francine or Susan or Corey, have any questions?
I've got a few, but I've been talking a lot, Susan and Francine. I don't want to jump on you guys. So if you have something on your mind.
No, my questions are already covered by the group list that Michael.
Okay, I guess my questions have to do more with, you know, we've got a building, we've got a purchase price, so we've got kind of a budget for the renovation. I don't really know how to phrase this the best, but is it getting your departments what they need? And I ask that in the context of if there were, and I don't want to phrase this, is it possible to do more with the building than currently is right now? Are we talking about additionals after this? I'm not saying yes or no, that's a good or bad thing. I'm just wondering if we do this, is that kind of it for this building, or is there additional capability we can build into the land and the structure down the road? That's how I could phrase that question.
What I can tell you is the 62 Elm Street building, we're just out of space, simple as that. If you look at the history of the building, it was built in 61. There was a remodel in the late 90s. The late 80s, early 90s. And then there was one around 2002. And that was the last one we did. But we're actually because we're so starved for space, we've moved outside the actual footprint of the building. We've had to put up a Quonset hut equipment. We've done the dance with the state inspectors about the cells. And
So Chief, does this get your department completely on 3A? Does it cover your needs for what you're currently talking about? Is that, so the Cohasset Police Department has a new home and it has all the facilities you need?
Yeah, that's exactly what this will do. And that's really where we need to be.
Okay. Chief Dockery, so it sounds like there's a small, but I mean, is this a thing where
really we need to be.
if you believe there's more that's needed up there, you can do more up there, or is it very limited? Is that kind of it?
Hold
With
on.
this, Chief Dockery?
The chief froze. Hold on, I'm gonna get my computer. There you go.
Sorry, Corey, could you run me one more time?
I got you now twice. Sorry, this is kind of goofy. The question is, so I just heard, basically the idea is this current project as conceived everything you need as you would imagine, or is there more you can do in the future with this space? So let's say is this the potential for a secondary, larger facility, or having more programming space, just a little, is there potential going forward in this space, or is that all you'll need and that's kind of it?
I would say hopefully, but right now I echo Chief Quigley. We are out of space at Elm Street. Again, we have a storage container in the back of the building. Again, our ambulance is housed behind the town hall that we really can't get a hold of if we need to. And it's our backup ambulance. But if we could have it under our own roof with personnel, we could deploy it more often. So this will help us.
This gets you that.
Yeah,
Okay.
this gets us that.
All right, thank you.
That should be. This is why.
Chief Docker, along those same lines, when you pick people up in an ambulance, I assume you take them to South Shore Hospital, generally speaking, or somewhere. And that ambulance is out of district at that point. Do we typically pull the other one out of storage, or is that really more in long-term storage? I mean, do we, when our ambulance leaves town with somebody in it, do we rely on mutual aid from our surrounding communities for that period of coverage, or do we actually roll the other ambulance right now?
No, we rely on mutual aid, but I'm
okay.
They're getting busy themselves.
So we would be effectively putting that ambulance in service as a second unit, staffed, ready to roll when the first ambulance leaves town with somebody in it.
That's correct. That gives us the option to do that. And that's what, we need to look at, is using that ambulance more often. Because our call volume is going up. People are sicker each day, and relying on our mutual aid partners isn't that reliable. Hingham and Situate both run 2 ambulances, and we end up going mutual aid to them more often than coming to us. So,
right. You're on mute, by the way, Chief.
I was running multiple.
We're probably getting you through Gene's microphone.
So we're relying on our mutual aid. Now, mutual aid partners are busy themselves.
Yeah.
And so this would allow us to provide the best service we can to the citizens here in the town.
How often do we get a second ambulance call when the first one's already deployed? I mean, I'm sure
sorry,
it's not
Brian,
often, but does
I don't have staff for that right now. I can work on finding that for you.
I don't need a surgical number, but does it happen, or is that really a remote case?
No, it happens.
Okay.
It happens.
Okay. And I'm guessing Gene's going to tell us we're out of time. Good guess?
Yeah, sorry, we're trying to manage several things at once. So
Understood.
we're gonna start prepping, but hopefully this is a good head start.
Okay. I think this is a good head start. This is certainly going to be, probably a follow-up set of questions and or possibly another discussion, but I think this really gets it going. It certainly gave me an answer to the most important question that I had regarding this building.
And I think if you all want to do a tour, we're gonna ask advisory the same because it is owned by someone right now.
Yeah.
So we want to be respectful of that, but if you want to send us some availability, we can try to coordinate.
Anytime too. On our
Chief-
end.
Chief Dockery, just one quick thing for you, if you don't mind, is if you depart from this building, are you going down King Street? Or are you going down 3A and then right on Beechwood to get up to North Cohasset? Or to go and get up to the Beechwood neighborhood?
Beechwood, it would depend on, if we're going to like the 400, 500 block of Beechwood, probably going on King Street.
Yeah, okay.
If we're going to the 200 block, it'd probably down 3A.
But that's probably, the King Street's probably where you save most of the time. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
All right. That was
And the other thing
just
too
fire
is,
about it.
now we're on the west side of the railroad tracks too with this station.
Yeah,
Right now,
yeah.
all our apparatus is on the east side of the tracks. So when the commuter rail comes through, we're cut in half and we gotta wait until they go through. There's the crossing at Lower King Street, especially when they have the two trains coming, one coming southbound and the other one coming northbound. We gotta wait for those two trains to pass. I mean, Corey, it's right behind you, that northbound train's waiting.
My son gets stuck in the school bus, literally, like he's 10 minutes late all the time because you got the one wait and you want to hear. It's like
Yep.
watching paint dry.
Yep. So that's another factor is the commuter rail.
Okay,
All right, well, thank you. We'll be in touch.
thank you as well. And,
Brian, are we wrapping? Because we still
no, we're
have,
not wrapping. We've got
On
additional items on the agenda, Michael.
well, we still have questions on town hall for whoever's in a position to answer them.
Yeah, I think our guests are wrapping. So we're gonna have to deal with that in a follow-up, either set of questions
Okay.
or certainly another discussion. I completely understand, Michael. We had a time constraint and the decision was made to start the discussion, recognizing we probably weren't gonna finish it tonight no matter what. So we've gone as far as we can go, but if you have more questions, everyone, please jot them down. Let's aggregate them. We'll send them over.
Okay.
And at least provide a guide for the follow-up discussion. With that, what I'd like to suggest is that we move on to the minutes and then we can discuss just schedule over the next couple of weeks. But why don't we start with the minutes? Mike was kind enough to pull together, I think, 4 sets of minutes at this point. The first 2 are relatively simple. The second 2 are a bit more robust. Has everyone had a chance to glance at these? Are we in a position to actually make corrections and vote them, at least some of them, to get the process started?
Yep.
Okay, I have. Susan, have you had a chance to look at these? Okay.
Yes.
Corey, Francine, any opportunity to look at these or pull them up on the fly? Okay, so with regards to August 7th and 31st, these are really simple because what Michael had circulated to us were actually minutes that included the content of executive session, which we can't actually publish in minutes. So what I'd like to suggest is that, right after the line, so I'm looking at the Monday, August 7th minutes. I'm looking at the line about a third of the way down the page where it says topic. I would just cut everything from there down. So really the last entry in this minutes would say call to order 6:48, select board, et cetera, et cetera. I was trying to figure out if we actually articulated, that we were going to come back, that we were not going to be coming back out of executive session. Unfortunately, select board hasn't posted minutes yet either. I believe that, even the adjournment in executive session is covered by executive session. So I think we can just cut this here and end that set of minutes. Corey, executive session is more of a select board thing. Do you have any thoughts on this? You've seen this more often.
Correct. So, yeah, so we have the call to order, the roll call, and the executive session minutes, and we can note, for no further business would be discussed past executive session, and then the meeting is understood to be ended. So you don't have to have a motion to adjourn, but I think it's worth noting no further business past executive session. So, because we did talk about that in the meeting.
Okay,
So,
so
yeah,
just add a line that says no further business following executive discussion, or you want to say adjournment from executive session? What would you?
Both. That's fine. Or say committee adjourned in executive session.
Okay. Does that make sense, Michael?
Okay,
So, in the next line down from call to order, you just add one more, one sentence paragraph that says meeting adjourned from executive session.
now which document are you looking at?
I'm
What-
looking at Monday, August 7th minutes that you forwarded, I think on the 18th-ish of September.
The title of the document I've got open is CBC meeting notes. Executive session, August 2023.
CBC minutes August, September 2024, right? That one, Mike.
CBC minutes August-September 20, well, it says 2024, wrong.
We can be hopeful.
I think it's what you sent on the 11th, right? Of
Brian, why don't
September.
you go ahead and make the changes in your copy and send it out?
I don't even have it up in front of me. I'm working off of a hard copy. But I can mark it, Michael, and I can just scan it and send it to you.
Do you want me to? I'm happy to take that on. I can do it, make the changes and break it up and send them, redistribute. Mike, you're okay with
that
that?
would be perfect, because I'd love to actually just make the changes as we go and vote these.
Sure.
And
Yeah,
be
that's
done
fine.
with it.
Yep.
Do you have that actually open in front of you, Corey?
I do. Yes, I do.
Okay, so under Monday, August 7th, just after the call to order, add that extra line that says meeting adjourned from executive session, no
Yep.
further, no further items discussed after executive discussion.
Done.
Okay. And then from topic on down, we need to cut that. Now you all have the benefit of Michael's notes, but we can't publish those as minutes. Okay. And let's do the same thing with the August 31st minutes.
Done.
Yeah, so we'd cut from agenda on down. So after the attending.
Yep. I'm with you.
Okay. Which brings us to the minutes for September 11th. I had a couple of very, very small edits on this. Actually, before we go to September 11th, did anyone else have any other comments on the two prior sets of minutes? Okay. Which brings us to the September 11th minutes. Under fields and courts, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th bullet, third line down, it says if CBC funding not provide, actually, yeah, it says cost 4 million all in, request goes to CBC for funding. I think that should say CPC.
Got it.
Same thing on the next line. And at the end of that line, you should drop, there's just a random D hanging out there at the end of the sentence. You should cut that. Under concerns, the second to last bullet under concerns, there's a question. What is the percentage use of the Beechwood ball field each month during spring, summer, and fall? I mean, that did come up in the discussion. I'm just trying to figure out how to deal with the fact that that's not part of the fields and courts funding request. That's in front of us. It was kind of more of an aside.
It was not an aside, Brian. I think that was a very pointed question to understand, do we need these additional fields if we've got a Beechwood ball field that's under?
Okay, got it. Okay.
But
So it's not
Can I
related to the playground, it's related to the other fields. Got it.
we could also bifurcate this. I mean, so we can understand minutes as, you know, again, required by state law, open meeting law, to
Right.
cover items discussed. And we can also have Mr. Dick's or any of our notes that are part of the public record, but not necessarily filed for the purposes of minutes, right? So we can have both those things. So we can simplify this to, you know, board discussed, you know, and we can just choose whatever really important things are here, or even none of them. And that way they're just filed with the clerk, and that gets that off our desk, and
Yeah.
we can still have our notes.
Right. Just trying to log all the questions that still have to be answered. We don't want to
But-
lose track of those. But
Well,
they
putting them in
should be
minutes doesn't really
minutes.
help us with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Corey, what would you suggest? And I gotta be honest, I'm a little bit new to the whole minutes thing. Sam dealt with this directly with prior, you know.
sure.
secretaries.
No, I've been doing minutes for select board and, you know, yeah, the other boards, Jesus, cable advisory and economic development. So, I mean, my suggestion here would be to simplify this and break it down to say, you know, board discussed the fields and courts proposal, including questions about the Deer Hill field, the softball diamond, existing of other things. The board discussed costs of $4 million and what's included in them, as well as CPC funding. The board expressed concerns and will develop a list to send to the town manager to be answered. So leave it at that. And then kind of the same thing for roads and sidewalks was tabled. School maintenance fund, the same thing. Board discussed who was working on it and what was included. Board discussed maintenance items versus upgrades. Board discussed whether or not generating revenue through this model is appropriate. And then kind of just that would be kind of my rewriting of it. I'm doing it live here, so my apologies. But and basically we could bring this down to one page and still keep the list of questions. We can even have that as an addendum if we wanted to. But that just gets us out of the legal requirement here.
How do people feel about it?
I agree with what Corey is guiding us through.
Okay.
So Brian, let me take these. I'll break them up into 3 things. I'll make those changes and we'll just clean approve them next time. If we're meeting next week, you know, whatever. Is that okay?
We are definitely meeting next week. Okay. I'm supportive of that suggestion. Others agree?
I
Okay.
found that other board minutes are done in that same type of format as Corey's describing.
I think it certainly simplifies things.
Yeah, and again, that doesn't mean we're not going to keep track of other stuff, and we shouldn't. We absolutely should, but for the legal requirement of posting minutes, that's the best way to do it.
It's certainly the fastest way to get this back on track.
Yeah. All right, I'll tackle that. I'll have something out to everybody by tomorrow.
Corey, correct me if I'm wrong, but all these meetings are on YouTube at this point. Are they not? The Zoom?
That is correct. Our previous council advised us, though, that the physical filing of the minutes is still required.
Still required.
Yeah, because we don't have an archival policy of the video, and he actually encouraged us to keep the minutes and not the videos.
Yeah, but if people really want to get, you know, if somebody really wants to get into a detailed understanding of what was discussed at our meeting, they can always watch it. So,
well, yeah, that's why it's different between are you trying to learn or are you trying to meet the state requirement?
Right.
So yeah, this takes care of the second.
Okay. All right. So with that, why don't we? What I'd like to do is suggest we at least vote through the first 2 sets of minutes, August 7th and August 31st, as amended. Do I have a motion?
Move we accept the minutes for August 7th. Hope I've got 7th, 31st, September 11th.
Just
Not-
7 and 31.
I'm sorry?
Not yet, September 11th, Michael. Corey's going to rewrite them and circulate next week. So it's just the
Okay.
first 2. It's August 7th and August 31st.
Okay, so move.
Second,
Great. Well,
Okay.
sorry, Francine.
Yeah, so I was not at both of those meetings, so I cannot agree to both of those. So I don't know if you want to break them up.
Were you at one of the meetings?
I was at one of the meetings, but not both.
Okay, let's go ahead and break them up then. Apologies, Michael, could you make a new motion just on August 7th, please? Or someone, do I have a motion with regard to approving the minutes from August 7th?
Yes.
Motion.
Great, do I have a second?
I
Second,
second.
Great, roll call vote, Susan Franklin,
Susan Franklin, I.
Corey Evans,
Corey Evans, aye.
Michael Dick,
Michael Dick, aye.
Francine Lyons,
Francine Lyons, aye.
Brian Host, aye. Okay. And do I have a motion for the minute to approve the minutes of August 31st?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Great.
All right, Mike
Wow,
and Corey.
it sounded like an auctioneer.
Yeah, that's fine.
Same order. Roll call vote. Susan Frank,
Susan Franklin, I.
Corey Evans,
Corey Evans, aye.
Michael Dick,
Mike Dick, aye.
Francine Lyons. Not present.
Yeah.
Okay, and Brian Host, aye. All right.
401. Yes. Okay, good.
And Francine, you're getting the minutes for tonight, I hope, right?
I've got those, so
Okay.
I'll send them tonight.
Well, I'm saying the minutes of this meeting tonight. Okay.
The meeting, yes, the minutes of this meeting starting at 5:30 this afternoon, yes.
Perfect. Okay.
Francine-
So I think really the last item is just to discuss, you know, the next 2 weeks. The people aren't really talking about this yet. The warrant really needs to close, you know, somewhere between 4 and 3 weeks ahead of town meeting, which is the beginning of November. So we basically have 2 maximum of 3 weeks before the warrant goes to print. Gets locked down and sent to print. Corey, any clarification on what I just said?
No, that's correct. Yeah, we
Okay.
have about 2 weeks.
All right. So, plan for the worst, which is 2 weeks, hope for the best, which is we get a little bit more time than that. But that's really what we have to work with. In a perfect world, we will get the articles, we will get the town manager motions, we will get the policies underlying the stabilization funds, and anything else that we need to vote these. That would be the hope. And I think we should strive for that. We always have the ability to let a warrant go to print without our votes in it, but that is not ideal. So let's, my suggestion would be we strive to get as far as we can get and vote if we can. To that end, I mean, how do people feel about meeting more than once a week to get these across the finish line?
I'm fine with it. But I'm retired, so.
I'm
I,
asking people to be candid here.
I can't commit to 2 nights a week.
Okay.
it's possible I can do too.
It's possible.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, Wednesdays are very difficult for me, but
I
Thursday's
can make
a
it work.
possibility.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can make it work, but I think I don't necessarily think the bottleneck's going to be us. I think it's going to be the ability of information to be produced. And whether if we're just going to meet and just go have somebody just talk to us is not very helpful at this point. But I do think that I think the town, I don't like, again, the last couple of town meetings, I was very uncomfortable with sending the warrant out without votes. I think that's just a disservice to the community. And I don't want to be the poison that, the turd in the punch bowl, whatever the phrase is. But like I think can say there's a drop dead date. Give us what you have and we will vote on it as best we can with what you have. And it's not complete. You can expect to vote commiserate with the level of information. We can change that at town meeting if we really think that we vote negative and we now vote positive. But I'm hesitant. If we have a warrant go out with other stuff, I think it just makes it really hard for people to understand what to expect. I don't love that. So I would strive for us to be as strong as possible on we're going to make votes and have everything ready and be prepared to present it to us. And that way we can make a vote and then the town knows where we are. So that's my
Okay.
speech.
In addition, I think the proponents need to understand when we have major concerns and will work with us and get involved in conversations with us to understand objections that we may well have on these very important and major projects. So it's more than just taking a vote. It's engaging with the proponents and guiding them with our concerns as the Capital Budget Committee, people who have been watching out for the town's fiscal health as our role.
We can ask, we can plead, we can't
There's
compel.
not a whole lot of time for guidance, unfortunately, with this
Yeah.
schedule. It's just, you
And
know,
that's
why
that's true too, which is
Right.
why I'm just polling people how they feel about,
Sure.
during this abbreviated
Yeah, but
process.
the risk
moving
is
to
a
more than once
negative
week.
vote, anyway, the risk is a negative vote, which is not the consensus that the proponents are looking for. They've said that many times. They're trying to get consensus for a special town meeting.
Yep. So what we have outstanding is fields in terms of first pass with capital budget and the proponents. We have another look at fields and courts. I mean, it's largely the same package that we saw in the spring, but we clearly need to hear it again and understand exactly, what's in there.
And offer our reactions. We have not had a chance to engage with the proponents on.
That's true. So there's that, and then there's schools, which is both the maintenance stabilization fund, maintenance and repairs stabilization fund, and special tax. And also it appears that there's some additional request for site study work and further review of the building up there for potential renovation and or whatever else. And I don't know if that's been voted, but my sense is that that's coming on to the warrant at a special town meeting. My understanding is the number is 400,000. And it's probably 1/3 site work, 2/3 feasibility work or idea work. It was discussed, at the last select board meeting. And that's about all I can tell you at this point. So we've got two things we've got to hear from the schools on. And so I think that's going to be a significant discussion. So maybe we get schools in as soon as they're ready to come. My guess is that they're going to want to go last. But that was really the thought between moving to twice a week so that we can get schools and fields and courts in on different days and not get cut short on our conversation like we did tonight. And that would leave us, at least 1 week after that for follow-up discussions if we were to split those and bring them in, all within a 1 week period. Thoughts, ideas? What do people think?
As I mentioned, I'm okay with twice a week. One thing I want to put on the table here is joint meetings with advisory, even if it's after the warrant closes.
Yep.
There's a lot of benefit there.
Good point.
We may be forced to do it because there's no one available, right? If advisory may be meeting twice a week as well, you run out of weekdays real fast.
Yeah. And they meet Wednesdays.
Okay, let me see if I can get fields and courts for this Thursday. Francine, my instinct is that if we have the benefit of you joining us, my instinct is that the schools is a topic where I'd like more people than less. But how do you feel about it, Francine? I mean, if I have the flexibility to schedule one, for a day when you're not going to come and one for a day when you can come, what?
Yeah, I'd prefer to be part of the school discussion as much
Okay.
as as much as possible.
Okay. All right, let me see if I can get Fields and Courts for Thursday, and we'll try to get schools for next Monday, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And that'll give us at least a week, maybe more to work with after we've heard all of the requests. That's all I've got.
I
Anyone
just want
else?
to be sure if, well, I mean, as we're getting into go time here, we have to be sure that if we're meeting, we're, blazing new ground, making progress, right? We've got a list of questions that Mike sent around, and largely they're still out there. So I guess my question is in process here. Well, how do we get through, how do we get to a vote? How do we figure out what are the questions that we are going to ask at this meeting that we need answers to, understanding that this is the last time at the last bite at the apple, and we're going to vote right afterwards, or we're going to vote without a further presentation. I just want to be sure we're not having the same conversation a second time.
I guess what I'd suggest is that we take the list of questions we already have, add anything that we have to it prior to each of these meetings, so that people have the ability to prepare their thoughts prior to coming to us. And that would minimize the number of follow-up questions that come out of the meetings themselves. I mean, that's about as creative as I can get. Any other thoughts, ideas?
Yes, several questions have been answered, particularly tonight.
Yeah.
I will go back to my notes and put together a list of questions that I think are still outstanding. And is there a policy for me not to send it to everybody? Or can I send
I think if it's a list of questions, I don't think that's deliberation.
Great.
I think that's a list of questions that we're, requesting from the proponents to help them prepare, as opposed to, debating anything, us debating anything. I don't know if anyone else has a different view, but I think as long as we don't debate these things, and we just compile a list of questions that are outstanding and send them out, I don't think we violated anything at all. I don't know, Corey, if you feel differently about it, but
I mean, if we want to be on the safe side, I mean, everything that has been answered is already in a public meeting, right? It is already on recording and has been discussed in public. So there's no new information that Mike is adding outside of just being a scribe, which is extremely useful for us to operate. The new questions, to your point, we're not talking about them, but if we are going to use these questions in a public meeting, then, the open meeting law question is solved, because we're talking about them in public meeting, right? The remedy for an open meeting law violation is to talk about an open meeting. So if our plan is to have these questions presented at the meeting, then there's no violation to be fixed. So
there's no, as long as there's no deliberation, there's no vote.
Right.
It's
correct.
It's not an issue. We're going to compile a list of thoughts, and that's it. So I think we're
If
fine.
people have any questions they want to add to the list, is that considered a discussion?
No.
Okay, so let's do that. Then I'll send out my version and send it to all. And if you have anything to add it and send it on to everybody.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Okay, and Fields Courts is next up. The schools is right behind us, so we should do all the questions when we do this next pass.
Right.
And we can just start breaking them off in order and sending them out as soon as we
Yeah, we should also send them to whoever's presenting. That way they know exactly what we'll be asking. Send them to Michelle
Exactly.
or whoever.
That's the whole point, is give them at least an opportunity to get a head start thinking about it. They may not have time to prepare materials, but at least they, don't feel like they're getting peppered with new questions.
Sure.
All right.
Just one other thing. My question, I'm the most junior member. Historically, junior members will take on the work of writing stuff down. Francine, I'm just offering my services if you no longer want to do minutes. But if you're happy with them, I don't need to take that on. But I just thought I'd make a good faith gesture there.
That's fine with me, because I don't know how many of these meetings I'm going to be able to make. So if you want to do that, I am trying to go back and fill in for prior meetings through the beginning of this year where I was present. But going forward, I think I've talked to Brian, you before. This is going to be a tough year for me to be consistent.
Thank you.
Okay, and Francine, you and I should chat just offline, get an update on that, just so that we understand exactly what we're looking at going into the next cycles. All right, is there anything else for this evening?
No, move we adjourn.
I would just add for the next minutes, Brian, just add a vote for secretary. That way we can just begin with that, and I'll start taking notes immediately. So
Okay. And we
Second,
still need to
Avi.
get one of the appointments cleaned up, so we can't, well, okay.
You want a motion for Corey to become secretary?
do it next time, first thing on the agenda. Yeah.
Okay,
We'll put it on the agenda for the next go round. Yeah.
got it. Okay. And
Okay.
Francine, thank you for doing all the minutes over all the years.
I don't know about that. My computer seems to have wiped out a bunch of my personal files and these files too. So
I hope nothing, irrecoverable went with that group. Either personal or otherwise. So that's a little
But
spooky.
still,
You don't know
thank
what
you.
is gone until you go looking for it, right?
exactly. So
All right. Well, we've got a motion to adjourn. Would anyone like to second the motion?
Second.
All right. Roll call vote. Susan Franklin,
Susan Franklin, I.
Corey Evans,
Corey Evans, aye.
Michael Dick,
Mike Dick, aye.
Francine Lyons,
Nancy Lyons, aye.
Brian Host, aye. The time is 7:08 and we are adjourned. Thank you
Thank you.
everyone for your